Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome the Charter Trustees to this meeting of the Poole Charter Trustees, and welcome to the press and members of the public. In order to ensure the meeting's managed effectively, please could you everybody follow these ground rules for speaking. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand physically to indicate, and you will be given a microphone by one of the mace bearers here. Where there appears to be consensus in the meeting for a motion, I will ask if there is any dissension. When a formal vote is required, this will be carried by a show of hands. Charter Trustees are advised that there is no live stream of this meeting. However, it will be recorded via the 360-degree camera and uploaded following the meeting. Before we start the business on the agenda, as you know, the Charter Trustees is a non-political body with the primary objective being to maintain and promote the historic and ceremonial traditions of Poole. I am keen that we all work together to maintain this objective. So we now take agenda item 1, apologies. I'll ask the Honorary Clerk to report the apologies received for this evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Apologies have been received from Councillor May Haynes, Councillor Peter Sidaway and Councillor Oliver Waters.
Can I also give apologies for Adrian Chapman-Law? Thank you.
And also apologies for Councillor Vicky Slade.
And Councillor Peter Cooper also sent his apologies in the last half an hour or so.
Thank you. We'll now take agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Honorary Clerk, can you report on any declarations of interest received?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No declarations have been received to date, but if members do consider they may have an interest to declare, if they'd like to follow the decision flow chart that's included in the agenda pack and use that as guidance, that might be helpful.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you. As chair of the Poole Sherbrooke Twinning Association, and reference item 5, particularly paragraphs 12 to 13 on our agenda, as that involves the possibility of a grant to the Twinning Association, I do have obviously a conflict of interest, I suppose, and I will leave the room whilst that's particularly one's being considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I've been attending the Poole Sherbrooke Twinning Association meetings as an observer. I'm not actually a member of the committee, and I've also been attending as an observer most of the meetings of the Society for Poole to do the beating of the sea bounds. And but again, I'm not actually beyond that. But yeah, I've attended both organisations, and they are obviously both seeking grants.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. We'll now take agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes and matters arising. Charter Trustees are asked to receive the minutes of the meeting held on 17th of October 2023 and to consider any matters arising. Councillor Earl.
Thank you. I was just going to ask that they're amended to include me as present. I'm not on the list, and even though I was a couple of minutes late, I was still there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lepedervan.
Thank you. I've already queried this with the, whatever his position is. Sorry. In the minutes under the report of the Civic Working Party, when we set up the new structure of the Civic Working Party, it talks about the previous mayors being contacted to see if they are going to be involved in it, and I haven't seen any feedback on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Lepedervan.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Lepedervan. Just in response, just to reiterate what I mentioned to you before the meeting, we will send something out in the next few days, canvassing opinion for additional members for the working group. Thank you.
So is everybody in agreement with the minutes from the last meeting? Yeah? Okay, thank you. We'll now go on to agenda item number 4, which is my report. Before I update you on my recent activities since the last meeting of the Charter Trustees, I'm sad to advise you that former Mayor Randolph Meach passed away just before Christmas. Randolph was the Sheriff of Poole in 1984 and Mayor of Poole in 1987. We send our sincere condolences to the family and former colleagues of Randolph. Please be upstanding to observe a minute's silence. I'll now continue with my Mayor's report. It's been a very busy period since the last Poole Charter Trustees meeting, with lots of engagements since the end of October and throughout November and December. I'll mention a few of these important engagements as there are too many to talk about more. Saturday the 28th of October saw the launch of the Poppy Appeal, and my consort and I had a busy time in Poole Dolphin Centre selling poppies and chatting with shoppers. It was a very worthwhile event and, as you'd expect, was well received by everyone. The following day, Sunday the 29th of October, we attended the High Sheriff of Dorset's legal service in St Peter's Church, Dorchester, which was very well attended by many mayors of Dorset. On the afternoon of Friday the 3rd of November, my consort and I visited Camford Heath Library for their Camford Heath Remembers event, where I received a beautiful hand-crocheted poppy and an illustrated commemorative keepsake presented by the Association of Residents of Camford Heath. It has pride of place in my kitchen. It's really pretty. That evening we attended the firework display at Talbot Primary School. After Disney World, I think it's the best fire display I've ever seen. It was absolutely fantastic and everybody absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. It was fabulous. Tuesday the 7th of November, we attended the Bournemouth University graduation ceremony. It was an honour to be included in such an important event, and I felt very proud of all the young people receiving their degree awards. That evening we attended the Parkstone Sea Cadets Awards presentation evening, and I felt privileged to hand out awards to the Sea Cadets who worked so hard to achieve their goals. Saturday the 11th of November, we observed the 2-minute silence at Poole Dolphin Centre, which was very well attended and organised by RBL Poole. And following this, we visited the Oakdale Care Home for their Remembrance Awards ceremony, where I presented medals to several of the residents. It was a wonderful event with all the staff dressed in 1940s outfits and an Andrews Sisters type band singing songs from the era, giving it a real wartime feel. It was lovely. Sunday the 12th of November, of course, was the annual service of Remembrance and Parade in Poole Park. A very moving occasion as always and very well organised and attended. I was delighted to attend the Poole Sherborne Twinning Association event on Thursday the 16th of November, where I was presented with a cheque for my chosen charity, Dorset Mind. On Thursday the 30th of November, I went to the Guildhall London for the Rifles Regiment Biennial Awards dinner, accompanied by the mayors of Bournemouth and Christchurch. It was a very grand affair, also attended by Queen Camilla. Throughout December, my consort and I attended many beautiful Christmas-themed events, including including the Camford Heath Christmas light switch on, Commodore's reception at Parkstone Yacht Club, Christmas in Parkstone at St John's Church, the Admiralty Carol Service in St Martin in the Fields, Poole District Scouts Christmas celebration, Aladdin pantomime at Poole Lighthouse, the Forest Home Light Up a Life Remembrance celebration, and in December I also attended the opening of the Parvalux Electric Motors new premises in Poole and visited the Winton Parkstone Community Pantry, where I met many of their hard-working volunteers. This is just a snapshot of the many events I've attended since our last meeting, and I have been humbled and privileged by all the good work that's carried out in Poole, especially that of the many hard-working volunteers who keep our communities vibrant. Thank you. I'm going to move on to agenda item 5, the report of the Civic Working Group. I call upon Councillor Pete Miles to present the report.
Is it on? Yep. Okay, the recommendations were that we have the freedom from the HMS Cadstock trustees note that the intent to grant the officers approve of HMS Cadstock freedom of Poole. We also talked about the grant funding scheme. Trustees approved the grant funding policy for the implementation as of the 1st of April 2024. Beating of the Seabounds, trustees approved the payment of £5 grand to the Society of Poole for the support of the Beating of the Seabounds event taking place in 23-24. We also spoke about Poole Shrubbery Twinning Association. Trustees note the recommendation for the Civic Working Group. Yep.
Thank you. Are there any questions at all? Councillor Howell.
Thank you, Mayor. First, starting backwards, with the flag, are we back to a position now where we do not have a flag to use, and should we just now finally go and use the Poole flag that's been produced by an outside body as our emblem, given that we can't use the coat of arms? And in regard to the grant scheme, I'd like to propose a couple of amendments. Firstly, I'd like to point out that when you open the file up, it still says Workshop Charter Trustees at the tab at the top, so the file name actually in the document needs to be updated. But the two amendments that I'd like to make are in 1.1, it says the remit of upholding the historic ceremonial traditions of the former borough of Poole. I would think to be accurate and give the full kind of breadth of what we should be doing, it should read historic civic ceremonial traditions and charter rights. So I propose to add the words and charter rights after historic civic ceremonial traditions. And the second point is that we are currently only proposing to give the grants to organisations. In Poole, there's a generally lack of civic society organisations. A lot of the work that goes on is carried out by individuals, and therefore I feel that we should give an opportunity for individuals to apply for grants at a lower level, say a maximum of £500 or £1,000, to to get them started on schemes and to grow things in Poole. I mean, if we stick to organisations, then we're cutting out a lot of people that would potentially be doing good things and trying to make, begin organisations that we need in this borough. So yeah, I'd like to propose those. I don't know if people want to comment on them, perhaps we should vote on them separately.
Would anybody like to second the Councillor Howell's proposal? Councillor Rice, thank you. Councillor Earl?
Thank you. I was going to request if we could take those two amendments separately. I think the first one, absolutely agree with. I don't see any problem with the civic side, but I do have some concerns. I completely agree with the intention to be as flexible as possible and to help our communities, but I slightly worry around what scenario we would be in if we're paying directly into individuals' accounts. What I would suggest instead is that as Charter Trustees, we could direct them into how they would constitute an organisation and get a bank account that could oversee that funding, which is fairly easy. 3 people getting together, opening a bank account, putting in a constitution. You can do it in a day. So yeah, I think the first one I'd be happy to vote for, but not the second one so much. Thanks.
Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. In one of the other roles I hold, I'm a member of Transition Town Poole, and we've actually sponsored other groups where they don't have a bank account or constitution, but they follow our aims. So the other possibility, going on from what Councillor Earl was saying, would be to encourage people to work with one of the existing organisations in the area that allows that then transparency and the, I suppose the concern is about people putting it in their own bank account. They're not coming up with what we ask of them, and we do ask as one of the conditions of a grant that people come back and report on the activities they've undertaken. So working through an organisation would enable them to do that, even if they hadn't got to the point. And I appreciate it's a small amount of effort. It's still perhaps not when they're forming a group or just starting the confidence to do it or the knowledge that it will go forward. Thank you.
Councillor Potabone.
Thank you. I may have misunderstood what Councillor Howell said, but I think he referred to setting up new events. I think we talked about that at the Civic Working Group, and it's very much to continue and encourage traditional events rather than to inaugurate new ones. Now, after a time, something could become traditional. I mean, we didn't sort of go into that, how long it's got to be going from now to become traditional, but not to start something new. It's to keep going the traditions as I understand it.
Thank you.
Just to clarify the point that Councillor Biddevin refers to, as proposed, it reads, applications for funding or events will only be considered if the event has been in operation prior to 2019 or marks a significant historic event or anniversary. That's as proposed, but obviously open to debate.
Madam Mayor, just to advise Charter Trustees on the first recommendation to insert the wording, personally I would like to check that against the legislation, check the right wording is being used. It's the difficulty of not seeing proposed amendments and not having them in writing. I don't know if Councillor Howell would like to confirm the exact words. But what I would like to do is just compare them with the legislation that sets up the Charter Trustees to ensure that you're not setting out anything that goes beyond the powers of the Charter Trustees in doing that with the exact wording. So I'm either happy for us to take it away and do that, but we can't do that because you want to pass a resolution. So if we can have the exact wording, that might be helpful. But in future, if someone's going to bring an amendment like that, to bring it to us beforehand so we can get to check it. We could advise then on the exact wording and get the wording spot on.
Councillor Trent.
I'll see if I can get the right passage, but I looked up the flexibility side with what the City of Bath Charter Trustees do. And I shared with a few people the wording that they had, or the advice. If I can find it, that is. That's the trouble taking things from sent emails. I think basically it was or events that promote or support the Charter Trustees and the morality of the said town. So, because I think there was a limitation on what we could give grants for, but the wording that they use, and I can't find it now, which is not very helpful. Actually, they've had help promote the morality and Charter Trustees, and they went further and said typically any grant should be for events which have a focus of children and they are used, blah blah blah. But it was just this bit that it helped promote. It kind of allowed for new events, not just keeping events that were pre-2019, but it was worded very carefully, and I thought something like that could be built into it, maybe initially, or I think after the scheme has been revised, because I think it's important to get the grant scheme going, but I do think that we need to learn from experience and maybe make it just a little bit more flexible. As I say, it gets launched 1st of April, so we don't quite know how it's going to hit the ground there, but it was just this little bit about things that aren't fixed in history but are relative to history, and I think that's what Mark was trying to get added to it. The first part of it, as well as a small grant idea.
Councillor Howell, are you able to give us the precise wording of your proposal?
So in 1.1, where it says in the third line, upholding the historic, civic, ceremonial traditions, after traditions, add the 3 words, and charter rights. So this is completely in line with the legislation, which I've looked at in detail, and actually the primary purpose of that legislation was to transfer charter rights and as well as the physical assets. So there should be no problem with that. Do you want to take the vote on that, or shall I go on to address the other points?
I'll just read out the wording again, so absolutely know that we've got it.
Yeah. I should also say that in 2.3 there is a repeat of those words, and the words should be, same words should be put in 2.3 after historic, civic, ceremonial traditions and charter rights.
By the way, if I could just put out, normally exactly the same as with a council meeting, if somebody's bringing an amendment, we want to get the exact words right, we would normally ask them to be circulated to all councillors, because I worry that people hear different things, they don't necessarily hear in the right order, so I would like to very slowly and precisely read out the exact wording of the recommendation if members are willing to take a vote on that now. That's helpful. So I don't know, Richard, have you got the exact wording?
Madam Mayor, if you're okay for me to read out, so on page 13 of your pack is the grant funding policy, paragraph 1.1. It is made up of 2 sentences, so I will read sentence 2. And I'm correct, Councillor Howe, correct me if I'm wrong. It is the Charter Trustees' objective to ensure that any grants it awards are aligned to the Trustees' remit of upholding the historic, civic, ceremonial traditions and charter rights of the
And also into 2.3. 2.3.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll take a vote on that now. So everybody who's in agreement, please a show of hands. Any against? And any abstentions? Thank you very much.
So I'll just address the points that were made by other members in relation to my second proposal. The purpose, in terms of events, there are a lot of historic traditions that used to happen in Poole that don't happen anymore. So those that they present lots of opportunity to reinvigorate the mayoral function. So it's not creating new events in the sense that something has no relevance to the history of Poole. It's looking back into history and saying, we used to do this used to happen, wouldn't it be a good thing if we did something around that particular function? For example, there used to be a mayor's fair. In terms of the issue about individuals, I get there is this neurosis about paying money into people's bank accounts, but we do that as a council in lots of other functions. The reason that is a check against money laundering, and it's a check to make sure that there's no corruption going on. But actually, the protection against that is that there would be a review of the particular proposal by the trustees who are in charge of awarding the grants, and also it would be a small amount, and therefore it's a kind of de minimis issue there. It is not, if you're starting a new event, for example, it's not necessarily easy to get people to form boards, to form a committee, just to do something that you need £500 to get off the ground. I've done it before. It's forming an organisation for an event that may be a taster event that starts to get things to go, gets people energised, and it's essentially an opportunity to give people a chance to grow something into what can turn into an organisation or a long-term tradition of benefit. But so be it. That, I think I've addressed people's points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. Could you please give us again the precise wording for your proposal?
So the wording would be that the grant funding scheme be opened up to individuals as well as organisations, but with a maximum amount of grant of £500, and that this be subject to confirmation by the council that it is legal for it to proceed.
Thank you. Are there any questions at all from councillors? Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned in terms of the way the wording goes, but also we've set a minimum limit for the grant of £500, but this new proposal sets that as the maximum limit for the grant to a personal account. So either we need, at 2.8 we say not a personal bank account, and 2.9 we say the limit is £500 minimum. So either we need to drop the £500 minimum in order to allow smaller amounts to go to individuals, and change 2.8 to allow it to a personal bank account for small grants, is I think what Councillor Howard is asking for, but those are the two paragraphs I think need changing.
Thank you, Madam. Just under normal circumstances, I would suggest that we take it away, get the exact wording, put all that, and then bring it back as an amendment to next time. I wonder if that would be acceptable, because you're right, there is a paragraph that says not personal bank account, so actually the motion needs to include the removal of those words. the motion needs to, or the amendment needs to be written out in that way. I don't know whether Councillor Howard would accept it if we said we understand the objective, let's pass this as it is now, but then go away and bring an amendment back to the next meeting. But that would be easier because we can make sure we've covered it all. And that way we can make sure we've got the advice that it is legal before we agree it.
Yeah, I don't want to flog a dead horse. It'd be indicate, if we could have an informal indication from councillors as to whether this is worth pursuing, that would be good. But if people think it is, I'd be quite happy for this to come back. I don't want to delay the actual passing of the main body of this grant scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pradhan.
Thank you. This may not be in true business terms, but I was going to propose that we accept the proposals as they stand with the amendments that we've just agreed, because a lot of work has gone into this. There was a lot of discussion at the Civic Working Party. At some point, I think there needs to be a cut-off. We want it introduced very soon, so we haven't got time to take it away and look at it. But I would suggest that we accept this as it stands, as amended, for a year or maybe two, see how it works, and then subject it to review towards the end of that time, so that we either in a year's time or 2 years' time ratify as it stands or amend as is deemed necessary at that point.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much for that. Paragraph 5.4, the very last paragraph of this proposed policy actually says this will or may be reviewed annually, this policy. So, the provisions are already there to look at it again if private individuals are knocking on our door for funding. I've got a couple of questions for clarification of this policy. Paragraph 2.3b talks about reserves with a capital R. Reserves aren't really defined, and of course every organisation, big or small, BCP as well, needs to keep some money in reserve. How much that is, who knows, but obviously even a small organisation, club or society needs to have some money in reserve, and how is this going to operate in practice, because some money needs to be kept back. So that's one question, how is that going to be dealt with? And the other point is, again, 2.3e, repayments of any monies that aren't spent. Now, when is that going to happen? Obviously, after any event, if you've organised an event, there is a wash-up period afterwards where late bills come in, or monies need to be paid to settle some debt or whatever. Is it going to be after 1 year after the grant was given, or what period of time does the money have to be given back if there is some money left over? So it's really, how's it going to work in practice? Now again, perhaps that can be dealt with in the annual review, because you may have had difficulties in deciding what was appropriate reserves and what was an appropriate period of time to demand the money back. Thank you.
Anybody would like to respond at all?
Thank you. I must admit I puzzled over the word reserves as well. I think in terms of small organisations, it's more their bank account or their, how much money they've got. Whether they call that their current account or their reserves is immaterial. It's how much money that organisation has as to whether they are deserving of a grant or perhaps rich enough not to need one, is I guess what we're testing. So I would actually propose, if that's possible, to change that word reserves to, well, what would be the right thing, bank account?
So my assumption in reading that was that you would do that by having a look at last year's accounts for whichever organisation was submitting, because then the reserves would be identified within their accounts. That was my assumption, and that you were simply looking at, well, is this an organisation that's got a pile of money that is coming to us to fund this, or is it an organisation that needs a bit of funding to allow them to do these events? So my assumption was reserves would be by looking at last year's accounts and taking a view on, is this which organisation that doesn't really need our money, or that. So I was more relaxed about that, but assumed that you'd be doing that as part of the assessment of do they need the money, if that's helpful. So I was more relaxed about that. And in terms of the timing, my sense is that it's just that people would do a wash-up account at whatever the appropriate stage was, whether that was a couple of months after the event normally, because you've got a bit of cash flow out and some invoices always come in a bit late. So I thought it was a more general approach, and that you'd then have a look at it, because they're not huge sums of money, but you want people to account for them properly within the community. So my sense would be not to put too fine a detailed point around it, because you'll always have an organisation that trips over that unless you make it so long that nobody would ever fall over it, in which case you'll be washing grants up 3 years after you've given them.
Councillor Trent.
Yeah, this almost to me looks as if it needs to be defined a bit more clearly, because any organisation that's active will be involved in things and planning things ahead, and we'll have perhaps something happening in the first month of the new year that might have been planned and paid for several months previous. And if the money that was earmarked for an event was classed as reserves, someone might look at it and say, oh, they've got quite a bit of money there, except it's earmarked for something. So I'm wondering whether there's a definition that makes it a little less restrictive and allows for organisations that do things, because anyone has to have something to, kind of tie them over. And, if you plan to, if you get a grant for something that's going to happen in September, and you've got an event in April, you will probably have the money already there for April. But if reserves becomes an issue, you then look into the reserve, oh yeah, they've got lots of money. So I kind of think it needs definition.
Thank you very much, Councillor Trent. Councillor Howell, would you be satisfied if we were to take this away and bring it back to the review or to the next meeting? Yeah?
So approve this as it is, and then bring back the existing amendments.
So we'll approve this as it is for now, and then bring back the amendment for the review.
If members vote to approve the recommendations from the Forster Working Group, that'll cover it.
Okay. Councillor Hadley.
With the amendment.
Yeah, sorry, it was just on one of the points that Councillor Howell raised about the flag, and I was confused about that as well, because it doesn't actually answer the question. Have we a flag we're allowed to use? We have one in front of the dais here, which is a nice, very old version of the flag, but it's great.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So I was going to just clarify. So we have agreed the design of the flag that's going ahead. This paragraph, Councillor Howell, is just to clarify, is that it's in relation to the use of the coat of arms, not the flag. So this is purely about the coat of arms, and you are the only body that can officially use the coat of arms. So it is just for that clarification, because there was an inquiry whether or not we, as Charter Trustees, you could grant the use of the coat of arms by another body. You're not allowed to do that. That's not permitted. You own technically that coat of arms. So the flag has already been resolved, and you've got that design.
So how?
Yeah, I think that's actually incorrect. We're not allowed to use the coat of arms because we are a separate body from the body that it was granted that coat of arms, and that is what the College of Arms said. And I have it in an email, a separate email, which I emailed them to just clarify that point, and they informed me that we weren't allowed to use the coat of arms.
If I can clarify, one of the royal charters that has been granted to the Charter Trustees since 2019 was the transfer of the coat of arms and the use of those coat of arms to Poole Charter Trustees from the former borough of Poole. So I've got that in writing. We've actually
if you can send me that, I'll send it back to the College of Arms.
I've got correspondence from the College of Arms, and we've got the official signed order or charter in our possession on your behalf.
Okay, so can we have agreement on the report as amended? Is everybody happy with that?
I recall that I abstained from voting on this one.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll now take agenda item 6, the budget and precept for 2023-24. I call on Matthew Filmer. Oh yeah, 2024-25, excuse me. I call on Matthew Filmer, Responsible Financial Officer, to present the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Charter Trustees. So the report starts with an update of the in-year position for 23-24, which is detailed on Appendix A to the report, and it's the budget and the forecast are to the far left. And we're currently forecasting an underspend of just over £12,000, which is after the 5k beating of the C-bounds contribution that was just agreed with the prior agenda item. The budget was due to be supported by around £24,000 worth of reserves. We're now forecasting with that underspend to draw down just over 12,000 reserves to support the budget for 23-24. So moving on to the budget for 24-25, we're proposing a number of changes which take into account that in-year position, as well as the budget workshop that we held at the end of last year. So we're first looking to reduce two budget lines, which is the hospitality and the civic regalia budget lines. These have consistently been underspent since the inception of the Charter Trustees. I just wanted to give reassurance that if we wanted to go over that budget allocation, there's reserves available should we want to do an event that's beyond that budget allocation. And if we're consistently spending a lot of money, we can increase the budget in future years. We've included £400 for support from the Council's communication team to increase the publicity and comms of the Charter Trustees. We have quite a large increase in terms of the cost of staffing that will be charged to the Charter Trustees for 24-25. So it's become standard practice at the Council to charge all staff costs, on costs and an overhead rate, which for 24-25 has been calculated at 21%. And that covers things such as the payroll administration, HR, admin buildings, etc., linked to the employment of those staff. We've also included a new line, which is the first table in the report I should have mentioned, which is now a charge for the honorary clerk, which to date we've never charged the Charter Trustees for that time, supported by that position. And as per the previous agenda item, we've set aside £20,000 for the grant funding scheme. We've set aside £10,000 for the Freedom of HMS Catterstock events and a slight increase to the Twinning Association grant. We've also set aside £2,500 for supporting the 80th D-Day anniversary events, and we've increased the mayor-making budget to £2,500 as we understand that the cost may be increased next year. So looking at reserves, we're forecasting to end the year just shy of 122,000, which is 95% of the 24-25 proposed council tax precept. The budget being set is on the proposal that we draw down £67,269, which takes us down to 43% of the council tax precept. So quite a large reduction, but as you know, we're supporting quite a number of large grant schemes for 24-25, and it's still higher than the recommended 20% that we keep for unforeseen expenditure. That's kind of unwritten standard practice that we try to set out. And lastly is the council tax base. So this is the calculation of the number of properties that we levy the council tax charging on in terms of the Poole area. We have a small increase in the tax base, and that means that we can have some more council tax income. And we are proposing for the 24-25 budget that we set a precept of £127,684, which means that the Band D charge is frozen at £2.14, the same as 23-24. So I'll stop there, Madam Mayor, and take any questions.
Councillor Trent.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think there are a number of things that need to be looked at over the next year. I'm not uncomfortable with the level of reserves because I think we've got to make some decisions regarding what we need in terms of places to support us. But the the question of using reserves for something that is outside what's budgeted, I am hoping that this is actually made clear, the situation that's been described, because I seem to remember having a discussion last year regarding the Jubilee weekend, which wasn't something that would have been planned in advance, and because it was after the end of the financial year and it was in the next financial year, there was some discussion as, oh, you won't be able to do this or that at the Jubilee event because it hasn't been budgeted for. And, you know, it would have been an ideal thing if the weather hadn't been completely disastrous anyway, to have been able to have used some reserves to support that event. You know, if we'd actually done something a little bit more. So I kind of think there needs to be something that says that reserves can be drawn on for events that aren't anticipated at the beginning of the year, because you know, I think there needs to be a little bit more flexibility. I don't think we actually have enough meetings to work through some things sometimes, but I do think that there needs to be that flexibility actually built into the wording, so that if something crops up that we need to do or we need to support, then I think we should be able to do it and not sort of say, well, no, that's not in the budget, you can't do it, which is a situation that I did face last year. So, you know.
Councillor Aitkenhead.
Okay, so I'm quite happy about the idea of us using reserves for things that we're doing as a one-off, and we need to take them out of revenue even though they're one-off things. But when I look at how this budget adds up, I can see quite a lot of things in it that are revenue that we will need year after year, and the amount of reserves we're taking out means that the amount that we're going to need next year, the year after and the year after, if we're going to have to keep taking money out of reserves. And I'm not sure that's the way that we should be running our finances. I note that we are being very minimal in terms of increasing the precept. It's a very small amount, the precept, compared to other things. I think if we are going to be using our reserves for things that are really ongoing revenue costs, we really ought to be increasing the precepts more in order to cover that. I'm not saying we should be stinging local people with loads of tax, because what we're talking about is very small amounts here, but over the whole council tax base it comes to quite a lot, and it may make all the difference in a few years' time as to whether we can actually afford to give grants to the organisations. So I think that we need to not just think about what we're doing this year, but think about ongoing, what we're doing year after year. And if we, it would be good to see the budget balance in a way such that the ongoing costs, we either make some savings in terms of the staff costs that we need, or else we put the precept up so that it balances not just for now but in the longer term.
Councillor Howell.
Thank you. I have two amendments that I'd like to propose, but I first have a question that I would be grateful if the Chief Executive could answer. We've been paying £15,000 a year for premises costs, but we don't have premises other than a share in a tiny office in the Civic Centre. Bournemouth Charter Trustees have been paying about £17,000 a year, and they have a mayor's parlour and also a consort's room as well. So how is the accommodation cost calculated? Because we seem to be very hard done by.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can answer that, but I won't take the credit for it, because this is an email that Philma sent earlier on today. The storage at Upton House for the regalia is charged at £3,500 per quarter, so that's costing £14,000 a year. The use of the Guildhall, we've assumed 5 events, 5 meetings at the Guildhall at £358 per event, so that's what goes to make up the current costs that are charged.
That doesn't add up to £15,000 though.
It's 14,000 for the storage, and then £358 per event times 5, £1,500. That's about
£14,000 for storage at Upton House.
Upton House. That's the cost because we've taken one of their meeting rooms, which they otherwise use for events and would gain income. There is also, of course, the storage of some of the items, I think, at Bournemouth Civic Centre, sorry, BCP Civic Centre, which I don't think is charged at the moment. But I don't see. But I don't know if Mr. Frum would add anything to that.
Yeah, totally. Stand up, so it's easier. I just find this is ridiculous. We need a mayor's parlour. We're paying enormous amounts of money to store a chain that could be kept in Bournemouth, or it could be kept here, perhaps. You know, this budget is crazy because we have no money for the mayor to communicate. There's nobody here tonight, no members of the public, because nobody knows this is going on. Yet we're paying enormous amounts of money for premises we don't need, and we've got 6 officers in this room. This is crazy. We don't actually have to have any officers in this room. We can run, according to the legislation, we could run these meetings ourselves. I mean, we don't want to do that. I'm sure we appreciate some help, but we are paying £107,000, going to be paying £107,000 at almost half our budget on staff, and clearly a lot of it is not needed. To address those issues, I mean, I'd just say a little bit more about the mayor's parlour as well. I've been trying to get in to see Bridge House. Officers have consistently stonewalled me and refused to let me even look around that as a potential place for a mayor's parlour. And it has some merits. It's about the right size. It seems to be used mainly for council employees to make tea and coffee, so it doesn't seem to be absolutely necessary for the functions of the council. And one of the historic titles of the mayor is Admiral of the Port. And in the future, one could see that it would be very nice for the mayor to walk from the port to the historic Guildhall and be seen in public at meetings and make that link between the port and the historic town. And also, it is a standalone building that the mayor could go to and from without putting to massive inconvenience officers who run this building, and all the security issues that go along with trying to access this building if you're an individual councillor, in the evening when no officers are around. So I would like to put 2 motions forward that we approve the budget, but both in relation, and these do vote on these separately, but firstly that we withhold the monies for salaries and withhold the monies for premises until we agree a way forward in terms of the actual support that we need in terms of officers, and until a mayor's parlour is actually agreed upon. The mayor's parlour element is a statutory obligation of this council to agree with the Charter Trustees. This should have been done 5 years ago at the start, according to the legislation. And if we're unhappy, which I think most people are, with what's been offered, which is the tiny room in there, we could actually go to the Secretary of State and ask the Secretary of State to make a decision on this. We need to, stand up as Charter Trustees and put the Charter Trustees on a good footing, so that the mayor's job is actually a job that people want to take on and do in the future, because otherwise it's going to die, and that would be a terrible thing to Poole.
Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. I value the team that give up their evenings to come and support us, and I think it would be wrong to make some unilateral view that we shouldn't be paying for things that keep us going, not least arranging the agenda, ensuring that we are staying within the law. So I don't support that aspect. I think there is something about what is the right room, what is the right setup for the mayoralty and for the rooms we use. I'd much rather be paying for somewhere sensible for the function and for welcoming visitors to the town, for the mayor to have that dignity rather than storage space. And it has gone on too long, and I absolutely support that. But I think we should be agreeing to work with those people who are supporting us to make the changes at the earliest opportunity, rather than trying to withhold money, which would be tricky anyway. Thank you.
Councillor Miles.
Storage aspect of the cost of charge is quite obscene. It's just dead money for objects we don't know what's in there and the value of them, really. So I think it's just ridiculous having things on storage for could be forever before we know, and it's just dead money, and that money can be put towards maintaining another building, a new building. Makes sense to me, or go towards what we want. It's just crazy storage money like that. Unless there's something set, I'm sure we can get it cheaper elsewhere. It's just a waste, an unnecessary waste.
Councillor Earl.
Thank you. Yeah, just to echo what Councillor Hadley said, I do feel very awkward about making such a big amendment to the budget in terms of withholding from our staff. I think we've actually got into the right position here, which is where we're actually paying BCP Council for what is owed for what we use our very dedicated staff for. And that really, if we were to decide to withhold at this point, I don't know who would be convening the next meeting, because I certainly wouldn't be willing to do it myself. But I don't think Councillor Howell is wrong. I think that there are some things that we could do as Charter Trustees, you know, to try and put a bit more into it, but it doesn't necessarily mean withholding money from staff. We can convene our own meetings informally together to keep the mayoralty alive. I don't think it necessarily means that we would need the additional support for that, and if we do want support for it, we do need to be paying BCP for it. And just in terms of the accommodation, I agree. I don't think this situation is ideal. I think we talked about it at the budget meeting, but didn't really come to a conclusion. So I think we should continue those conversations of how to find something that's sustainable, so we can return Upton House back to BCP and they can use it for the income generation that it can get. Thank you.
Councillor Trent.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with some of the frustration that Councillor Howell's expressing, but I don't think that withholding funding is the right thing to do. We do get support. I think there's a big debate as to how much dedicated support we get, and I do think we actually need to look at the support structure, but I also think we need to look at the structure anyway. You know, it may not be that the Charter Trust is the best way forward, but I would be very reluctant to you know, sort of go along with that proposal at this point. But I do think we need to talk about some of these issues and look at a long-term solution to it, because I think what backs us up, particularly in terms of premises, is pathetic. And I think in my year as mayor, I came across people who I thought would actually come in and volunteer if we had an office, a proper mayor's office, you know, come parlour. I think people would have come in and helped promote the Charter Trust and the mayoralty voluntarily in their own time, and I think there is a definite need to move things along and to take things to another level, but I don't think the proposal is the way to do it. I think we need to be mindful that there are issues that aren't right, that do need sorting out, but I think, you know, we should be passing this budget. The only thing that I do think we need to do, and whether that would have to be budgeted for. If you bear in mind that the next Charter Trustee meeting, scheduled one, is nearly 6 months away, and I do think we ought to have, and it came up in conversation over the last sort of few days and so on, that you couldn't put something off to such and such a time because there isn't a Charter Trust meeting till a lot later. I think there should be a Charter Trustee meeting, possibly early April, to deal with some of these things. I don't think we have enough meetings. 3 meetings a year does not, I think, make the Charter Trust run effectively. I think, we have one June, we have one October, then it's January, then it's June. And so I do think that we need to schedule in an extra full Charter Trustee meeting to agree some of the progress which I hope we make on the Civic Working Party and the Budget Working Party, because we do need to move forward. But that's the only thing that I would suggest that's outside the budget, and based on the figures provided, that's £358 worth of room hire. But that's my only comment on that. But I would much rather stick to the budget and sort some of these things out over the next year or so.
Councillor Hadley.
Sorry, surely the May meeting is mayor making, which is the next meeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to comment as the Honorary Clerk to the Charter Trustees. So the Charter Trustees, or the Charter Trust, was set up actually as a temporary measure to get through local government reorganisation and to continue the mayoralty and the sheriff's role as well, to maintain that pending a more permanent decision. Now, there is, I think we know of at least one Charter Trust that's been going since 1974 from local government reorganisation, because they set it up and they just kept it going in that form. But just to remind Charter Trustees that this is a parish council without any powers. The only power it has is to maintain the mayoralty, in effect, to maintain the civic and ceremonial traditions of Poole. That is the sole power. A lot of the frustration, I think, would be solved by having a more influential, more powerful parish council, town council. Town council, of course, would come with a mayoralty. My sense, to be frank, is that's the conversation that needs to be had over a period of time to work out what sort of structure do we want. And I will just say there is a parish council, I think West Northamptonshire might be wrong with that, with 135,000 population. So they've effectively gone for the former borough of Poole type size. There are parish councils down at the 3, 4, 5, 10,000 population. So there could be a discussion and debate about what the right form of that would be. In those circumstances, you would need independent staffing, and would you get the right staffing to support that? What we've tried to do through BCP Council is provide the staffing to support the mayoralty, and don't worry, nobody's going to go home in a tiff because of what you're saying about the cost, because we recognise that there is a big cost. But actually at the moment I think you've got a big cost supporting the mayoralty in effect, rather than the costs being applied to the Charter Trustees to carry out any specific functions, because you have no function other than to maintain the mayoralty and the civic traditions, and you've now given yourself some grant giving powers to support that. So, I mean, my suggestion to you would be these are all valid points. You need to discuss them and to work out what you want for the future. I wouldn't recommend changing the budget at this point, because if you want to change the budget, then you need to address your precept. If you want to change the precept, that's fine, but you need to remove a different recommendation. We need to make sure we've got that worded. You need to make sure you set your budget in detail so that what we can pass tonight is a budget and a resolution that stands up. So, I doubt that that's a subject for an open public discussion right now, but of course you are entitled to do that. But you would need to propose formal amendments, make sure those are properly documented, make sure you've got the right wording, the right amounts being changed.
Councillor Howell. Councillor Brown, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, just as a sort of last
intervention. Talking about the budget, I'm not, wouldn't be in agreement with changing the budget at this point, but I think, and I'd like to thank Matt for clarifying these sort of premises. I think it is an important point about the cost of premises and room hire that we're incurring, and that extra information is really useful to know. I think it would help for openness and transparency actually if the budget was just the presentation of the budget figures was amended so that where it's got premises just talks about room and premises rental, if it was actually just 2 lines for meeting room rental and civic regalia storage room costs, makes it a lot clearer. And then I'd just also like to just suggest that the civic working group at their next meeting review the regalia storage room costs, because that's quite a significant sum, £3,500 if it's using a meeting room. I suspect there's probably a more cost-effective way of doing it. I suspect it's not just a case of going to the local storage place and hiring a room there for £100 a month or whatever, but I think it depends on obviously how much we're storing, the insurance requirements of that storage and the security requirements of that storage. So I think if the civic working group can just review that and see whether there's a more cost-effective way than effectively hiring a meeting room, which seems to be an expensive way of storing our stuff. A storage unit would be better than hiring a meeting room at the full cost of a meeting room, I would suggest.
Councillor Howell, would you like to be clear and clarify your amendment?
Yeah, I mean, if I was a cynic, one might think that the resources of the Charter Trustees are partly being used to prop up the council costs to some degree. The chief executive said this is temporary. This is not temporary. It's not going to be changed suddenly. You never know. When in the future we might end up with back at the borough of Poole, and that would a lot of people would prefer that to be the case. But we've got to make the most of it now, and it is our responsibility to carry on the traditions of Poole and to try and reinvigorate them and to spread them amongst the population, because a lot of people out there have become disengaged from the Mail Tree, and that's a real shame. And we need to get back out there and make this work. And we need some money to do that. And we need a website, for example, other basic, organisational and communications budgetary items that allow the mayor to do the job and promote this organisation, all of which is entirely within the bounds of the Constitution and the rights of the trustees. And to be paying like 107,000 for staff, I mean, it's just clear that we don't need that full amount, So we need to have some kind of review of that. Now, we are only proposing a budget at the moment, so we're not actually authorising the payment of anything from that budget to any organisation such as the council. I would be worried if there was any assumption being made that because we approve this budget, that the whole sum for the year's storage would be paid, because that's not what we're approving tonight. We're just approving the budget. The amount when we pay these items in terms of officer pay and storage, etc. Are we committing 3 months ahead, 1 month ahead? If we're committing 1 month ahead, that is fine, because we've got time to be able to amend the situation in the past. But I don't think anybody probably wants us to pay 15 grand for storage of a mayoral chain when there's a solution in Bournemouth where the Bournemouth chain is kept, and actually for most events Bournemouth would be as quick to get to as Upton House. So I guess what I'm saying now is that I'm not looking for like an amendment, but I'm looking for comfort that we're not committing that all this money will go out and we will not be able to recover some of it during the year as the working group, you know, comes to some decision or recommendation as to how, you know, where we go with this kind of expenditure and how we reallocate to some more useful functions. Thank you.
So is there a proposal for an amendment at this point or not?
What I'd really like to know is to have that question asked before I answer your question. Is you know, we presumably there are no written contracts between the Charter Trustees and the Council in terms of this money that we're paying over, and therefore, you know, we need certainty that we're not committing for a whole year.
Thank you, Madam. I'm not certain of the arrangements, but I think we're on 3 months' notice for the storage facility. But bear in mind, it isn't just the regalia, actually, because the regalia is stored in the BCP Civic Centre. It's the cloaks, it's the hats, it's a lot of the civic regalia that came out of Poole Civic Centre that's being held in storage for whatever the long-term future brings. So I'm sure that if we found an alternative venue for that during the year, then it's probably 3 months' notice to move it, because Upton House would need 3 months to be able to get back to their letting cycle. So I think that's what's agreed. I don't have the agreement in front of me, but that's my understanding of it. That's helpful, unless Richard can add anything to that. I think I'll say we agree with that frustration. We collectively need to make a longer term decision. We have held out, I think, collectively for Poole Civic Centre. You know, that has not come through yet, and it would be very difficult to do on a disposal.
Councillor Potovan.
Thank you. It's not really relevant at this point, but I mean, I would point out that not only we, but BCP Council made a decision that would have meant the continued use, virtually uninterrupted, of the vertical slice of Poole Civic Centre. That decision, in my view, still stands, because it has never been contradicted by BCP Council at any time. That decision still stands, so why hasn't it been enacted?
Through you, Madam Mayor, simply because there is no economically viable proposal to refurbish and bring back into use Poole Civic Centre as yet. As you know in your role as councillors, no proposal has yet come forward for turning Poole Civic Centre into an occupied building with that identified as a separate area for Poole Charter Trustees to use.
At the time it was agreed there was a viable plan. Well, we were told it was viable.
Again, Madam Mayor, in the early years of BCP Council, in the early months of BCP Council, there was a proposal for a housing development with the Coroner's Court being moved into Poole Civic Centre and a part of that being available for the Charter Trustees. That proposal went to Future Places, BCP Future Places, to review. They came out with a different proposal. There has, as I say, since then been no economically viable proposal that has been made to the Council to use Poole Civic Centre, and therefore no viable use for Poole Charter Trustees. That has to be some 3 to 5 years off, even if we came up with a proposal tomorrow. And subject to mobile phone interruptions, to be frank, I think the viability of that as a proposal will be very difficult when we bring that forward.
Councillor Howell.
Yeah, I think where we are at, perhaps, is that, you know, we need some assurances, which we think we've partly got from the Chief Executive. So that I think we're saying that we've got 3 months commitment, basically, but we can speak with the Council about how we might adjust support in terms of Council employees and in terms of the storage, you know, on 3 months' notice, essentially. Is that correct?
Yes, happy to confirm that. We were just saying that the way forward I would suggest would be the Charter Trustees Civic Working Group meet quickly to have some of these conversations. There has been a conversation through the Budget Working Group where it was agreed that this building would be used in the first instance. We have made that room available. You know, if there were requirements from the Charter Trustees for more space, then I would put it to the registrars here to see whether we can create more space here as a short-term solution, because I think that would work more effectively.
Well, my second point was related to the accommodation and the mayor's parlour, which I mean, I've not yet come across a trustee who thinks that that solution is acceptable, and you know, we never really had a proper answer to you know, why Bournemouth Charter Trustees don't seem to be charged for the 2 rooms that they have, because they presumably are being charged for the storage of their mayoral chain, etc., as well, and other functions. So we're hard done by here. There's 5 years behind schedule, and what I'd like to ask, because the number of trustees do think that the bridge house might be a solution, and I think the chief executive might even have suggested that as a proposal initially, is that we like an open house hour or 2 is arranged, so that trustees can go and have a look inside and see whether it might be suitable.
Okay, so is that something then that we can take back to the working group and investigate?
It's just down the corner. It just needs somebody to open it up so we can go and have a look. Anybody who's a charter trustee, as they open the house, so that then if a proposal comes forward from the working group, everybody knows what we're talking about. You know, rather than waste lots of people's time, just open the door and let us have a look inside.
So the suggestion is that we can arrange that. We will arrange that we will have a visit, a site visit, and then at the next working group meeting we can discuss it. Okay, so can we now propose the budget, and do we take a vote on it?
Yes.
Can we take a vote on that, please? Yeah. All in favour? All those in favour? Okay. Any against or any abstentions? Thank you. We'll now take agenda item 7, the review of the risk register. I call on Neil Fraser, Deputy Head of Democratic Services, to present the report.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick one. The risk register remains broadly unchanged from last year's. The only slight change is a pleasing downgrade of risk in relation to safety of civic dignitaries at events. So I put forward for approval, please.
Okay, can we take a vote on that then? Everybody who's in favour? Agreed. Anybody against? Abstentions? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 8, the appointment to the position of Mayor of Poole 2024-25 and Sheriff of Poole. Oh. No, that's not right.
Sheriff of Poole for the same year and subsequent year for 25-26.
Okay.
It is for Sheriff of Poole for the same.
Sheriff of Poole for 25-26. Okay, start again. Let's start again. So we'll take agenda item 8, the appointment to the position of Mayor of Poole 2024-25 and Sheriff of Poole 24-25.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Who will then be the subsequent mayor?
Who will then be the subsequent mayor 25-26? Yeah, got there in the end. I call upon Neil Fraser, Deputy Head of Democratic Services, to report on this item.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And yes, so just to congratulate Councillor Mark Howell on his appointment as Sheriff-elect for 24-25 and subsequent Mayor of Poole-elect for 25-26 by way of uncontested nomination.
Yes, thank you very much for that very competitive vote. But I'd just like to say quickly that my main focus while I'm performing a civic role will be to work with and support the other civic holders and to try to deliver to future sheriffs and mayors an organisation that really works for them and works for the people of Poole. So you've seen a bit of that tonight. So I rub people up the wrong way sometimes, but it's always for a reason. It's always to try and get to where we need to be. And yeah, so I would just thank you very much, and I will work on your behalf and work with you to try and improve this organisation. Thank you.
Is there any other comments anybody would like to make? Otherwise, we're going to close the meeting now. Thank you.